Chapter 9: Physical and Cognitive Development in Middle and Late Childhood. Physical change and health. Number 1, body growth and change. Number 2, brain. Number 3, motor development. Number 4, exercise. Number 5, health, illness, and disease. Body growth and change. Body growth and change. Growth average 2 to 3 inches per year. Weight gain average 5 to 7 pounds per year. Head circumference and waist circumference decrease in relation to body height in middle and late childhood. Next is bones continue to ossify during middle and late childhood, but yield to pressure and pull more than mature bones. The brain. Brain volume stabilize. Significant change in structure and region occur, especially in prefrontal cortex. Cortical thickness increases. Activation, some brain areas increase while others decrease. Brain pathway and circuitry involving the prefrontal cortex, the highest level in the brain, continue to increase. Motor skill becomes smoother and more coordinated. Girls outperform boys in their use fine motor skill. Improvement of fine motor skill during middle and late childhood result from increased myelination of central nervous system. Exercise. Higher level of physical activity is linked to lower level of metabolic disease. This based on the following measure: cholesterol, waist circumference, and insulin level. Aerobic exercise benefits: lower incidence of obesity, children attention and memory, cognitive inventory control. Number 4, effortful and goal-directed thinking and behavior. Number 5, creativity. Ways to get children to exercise. Number 1, offer physical activity program at school facilities. Number 2, improve physical fitness activities in school. Number 4, have children plan community and school activities. Number 5, encourage families to focus more on physical activities. Middle and late childhood is time of excellent health. Accident and injuries. Motor accidents are most common cause of severe injury. Overweight children cause heredity and environmental context. Irregular meal times, too much family screen time. Irregular meal time, too much family screen time. Consequences: diabetes, hypertension, elevated blood cholesterol level, low self-esteem. Intervention program. Intervention program number 1, emphasize getting parents to engage in healthier lifestyle themselves. Number 2, feed children healthier food and get them to exercise more. Cardiovascular disease. Uncommon in children but risk factors are present. Adult coronary disease linked to childhood elevated blood pressure and high body fat levels. Health, illness, and disease. Cancer. Number 1, second leading cause of death in children 5 to 14 years old. Number 2, most common child cancer is leukemia. Number 3, children with cancer are surviving longer because of advance in cancer treatment. The scope of disabilities. The scope of disabilities, 12.9% of 3 to 21 years old in United States receive special education-related services in 2012-2013, an increase of 3% from 1980 to 1981. The U.S. Department of Education includes students with a learning disability and students with ADHD in the category of learning disabilities. Learning disabilities. Learning disability, difficulty in learning involving understand or using spoken or written language. The difficulty can appear in listening, thinking, reading, writing, or spelling. Dyslexia. Dyslexia, severe impairment in the ability to read and spell. Dyslexia. Dyslexia, severe impairment in the ability to read and spell. Dysgraphia. Dysgraphia, difficulty in handwriting. Dysgraphia, difficulty in handwriting. Dyscalculia. Dyscalculia, developmental arithmetic disorder. Dyscalculia, developmental arithmetic disorder. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD, characterized by inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsive. Boys are twice likely to receive ADHD diagnosis. Possible cause: number 1, genetic. Number 2, brain damage during prenatal or postnatal development. Number 3, cigarette and alcohol exposure during prenatal development. High maternal stress during prenatal development. Low birth weight. Challenge for children with ADHD. Number 1, adjustment and optimal development. Number 2, increased risk of lower academic achievement. Number 3, problematic peer relation. Number 4, school dropout. Number 5, becoming parent as adolescent. And last, substance use problem, mental health. Next is additional challenge for girl with ADHD. Additional challenge for girl with ADHD. Number 1, friendship. Number 2, peer interaction. Number 3, social skills. Number 4, peer victimization. And number 5, pregnancy. Long-term challenge, underachievement in math, reading, criminal activity, and unemployment. Emotional and behavioral disorder. Emotional and behavioral disorder, serious, persistent problem that involve emotional and behavior disorder, serious, persistent problem that involve. Number 1, relationship, aggression, depression, and fear associated with personal or school matter. Number 3, inappropriate socio-emotional characteristic. And lastly, boys 3 times as likely as girls to have this disorder. Autism spectrum disorder, ASD. Autism spectrum disorder, or called ASD, range from autistic disorder to Asperger syndromes and may have genetic basis. Autistic disorder. Autistic disorder onset in the first 3 years of life. Autistic disorder onset in the first 3 years of life. Number 1, deficiency in social relationship, abnormalities in communication, and restricted and stereotype pattern of behavior. Number 2, have deficit in cognitive processing of information. Number 3, is identified 5 times more often in boys than girls. Asperger syndrome. Asperger syndrome, good verbal language skills. Number 1, milder nonverbal language problem. Number 2, restricted range of interest and relationship. Number 3, engage in obsessive, repetitive routines and preoccupation with particular subject. Educational issue. Educational issue, individualized education plan, IEP. Individualized education plan, IEP, written statement specifically tailored for disabled student. Individualized education plan, IEP, written statement specifically tailored for the disabled student, IEP. Least restrictive environment, LRE. Least restrictive environment, or called LRE, setting as similar as possible to one in which non-disabled children are educated. Least restrictive environment, LRE, setting as similar as possible to the one in which non-disabled children are educated. Inclusion. Inclusion, educating a child with special education needs full-time in regular classroom. Inclusion, educating a child with special education need full-time in regular classroom. Piaget Cognitive Developmental Theory. Concrete operational stage. Number 1, age 7 to 11. Children can perform concrete operation and reason logically and are able to classify things into different set. Seriation, ability to order stimuli along in quantitative dimension. Transitivity, ability to logically combine relation to understand certain conclusion. Evaluating Piaget concrete operational stage. Evaluating Piaget concrete operational stage. Number 1, concrete operational abilities do not appear in synchrony. Number 2, education and culture exert strong influence on children development. Neo-Piagetian argue Piaget was partially correct, but his theory need considerable revision. Elaborated on Piaget theory, increased emphasis to information processing strategy and precise cognitive step. During middle and late childhood, most children dramatically improve ability to sustain and control attention. Number 2, pay more attention to task-relevant stimuli. Number 3, change in memory, thinking, metacognition, executive function. Information processing, long-term memory increase with age during middle and late childhood. Knowledge and expertise. Experts have acquired extensive knowledge about a particular content area. For example, 10 and 11 years old expert chess player remember more about location of chess piece on board than either college student who were not chess player. Working memory is passive storehouse to keep information until moved to long-term memory. Number 1, considered to be a mental workbench. Number 2, key component is the central executive. Number 3, children verbal working memory linked to morphology, syntax, and grammar. Autobiography memory. Memory of significant event and experience in one life. Strategies, deliberate mental activities that improve processing of information. Number 1, elaboration. Engage in more extensive processing of information. Child form personal association to increase meaningfulness. Number 2, engage in mental imagery. Number 3, understanding material rather than just repeating it. Number 4, repeat with variation on materials to increase number of association. Number 5, embed memory relevant language. Fuzzy trace theory. Memory is best understood by consider verbatim memory trace in GIS. Fuzzy trace theory, memory is the best understood by consider verbatim memory trace in GIS. Thinking. Executive functioning. Dimension of executive functioning are the most important for cognitive development and school success. Number 1, self-control, inhibition. Number 2, working memory. Number 3, flexibility. Critical thinking. Critical thinking, thinking reflectively and productively and evaluating evidence. Critical thinking, thinking reflectively and productively and evaluating evidence. Mindfulness, being alert, mentally present, and cognitively flexible. Mindfulness training, improve children attention, self-regulation. Mindfulness training, improve children attention, self-regulation. Creative thinking. Creative thinking, ability to think in novel and unusual ways. Number 1, come up with unique solution to problem. Number 2, convergent thinking. Convergent thinking, produce one correct answer and is characteristic of kind of thinking tested by standard intelligence tests. Convergent thinking. Convergent thinking, produce one correct answer and is characteristic of kind thinking tested by standard intelligence tests. Divergent thinking. Divergent thinking, produce many answers to the same question and is characteristic of creativity. Divergent thinking, produce many answers to the same question and characteristic of creativity. Metacognition. Metacognition, cognition about cognition. Metacognition, cognition about cognition. Meta-memory. Meta-memory, knowledge about memory. Meta-memory, knowledge about memory. Brainstorming. Brainstorming, individual come out with creative ideas in group and play off each other ideas. Brainstorming, individual come up with creative ideas in group and play off each other ideas. Intelligence, ability to solve problem and to adapt and learn from experience. Intelligence, ability to solve problem and adapt and learn from experience. Individual difference. Individual difference, stable, consistent way in which people differ from each other. Binet test. Binet test, mental age, MA. Mental age, MA, individual level of mental development relative to others, obtain general composite score. Stand for Binet 5 test. Binet test, mental age, MA, individual level of mental development relative to others, obtain general composite score. Stanford Binet 5 test. Revision to original test, analyze 5 content areas. Number 1, fluid reasoning. Number 2, knowledge. Number 4, quantitative reasoning. Number 4, visual spatial reasoning. And number 5, working memory. William Stern Intelligence Quotient, IQ. William Stern Intelligence Quotient, IQ, Person mental age divided by chronological age multiplied by 100. Normal distribution. Normal distribution, symmetrical distribution. Most score fall in middle of possible range of score. Next is few score appear towards the extreme of the range. Wechsler scale. Wechsler scale for age 6 to 16 provide an overall IQ score and yield 5 composite score. Number 1, verbal comprehension index. Number 2, working memory index. Number 3, processing speed index. Number 4, fluid reasoning. And number 5, visual spatial. Types of intelligence. Sternberg hierarchic theory of intelligence. Sternberg hierarchic theory of intelligence. Intelligence come in following form. Number 1, analytic intelligence. Analytic intelligence evaluate, compare, and contrast. Number 2, creative intelligence invent, originate, and imagine. Number 3, practical intelligence ability to implement and put ideas into practice. Gardner 8 frames of mind. Number 1, verbal, mathematical, spatial, bodily, kinesthetic. Next is musical. Next is interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalists. Everyone has all these intelligence varying degrees. Evaluating multiple intelligence approach number 1 has broadened concept of intelligence, teaching, and how children learn. Number 2, some feel multiple intelligence view have taken concept too far. Influence of genetics. Influence of genetic, comparing identical and fraternal twins IQ. Using intelligence tests. Using intelligence tests, number 1, avoid stereotyping and expectation. Number 2, no, IQ is not the sole indicator of competence. Number 3, use cohesion when interpreting an overall IQ score. Culture and culture fair tests. What is viewed as intelligence from culture to culture? Culture fair tests are intended to be pre-cultural bias. Two types of tests include items familiar to children from all socioeconomic and ethnic background. Next is tests without verbal question. Culture fair test hard to create. Culture fair test hard to create. Number 1, test reflect what dominant culture values. There are no culture fair tests, only culture reduced tests. What is measured as important to vastly around the world? Ethnic variation. Standard intelligence test score. African American and Latino children score lower than white children, but gap is narrowing. Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale recently find no difference in overall intellectual ability between Latino white and African American preschool children. Societal impact on ethnic variation. Fewer African Americans in science, technology, engineering, and math because practitioners expect they have less innate talent. African American experience stereotype threat and fear of evaluation during standard tests. Negative influence in perform, increased anxiety, produce worry that. Sample subscale of Wilshire Intelligence Scale for Children 4th edition. Verbal subscale. Similarity. Child must think logical and abstract to answer questions about how objects might be similar. For example, in what way area in lion and tiger alike. Comprehension. Subscale designed to measure an individual judgment and common sense. For example, what is the advantage of keeping money in bank? Sample subscale of Wilshire Intelligence Scales for Children 4th edition. Non-verbal subscale. Block design. Child must assemble set of multicolor blocks to match design shown by examiner. Visual motor coordinator, perceptual organization, and ability to visual spatial assess. For example, use the 4 blocks on the left to make pattern on the right. Similarities. A child must think logical and abstract to answer number of questions about how things might be similar. Example, in what way are lion and tiger alike? Comprehension. This subscale is designed to measure an individual judgment and common sense. Example, what is the advantage of keeping money in bank? Extreme of intelligence. Intellectual disability. Intellectual disability, limited mental ability in which individual has low IQ and difficulty adapting to everyday life. Organic intellectual disability. Organic intellectual disability caused by genetic disorder or brain damage. Cultural familial retardation. No evidence of organic brain damage. IQ is generally between 50 and 70. Gifted above average intelligence, IQ of 130 or higher. Gifted above average intelligence, IQ of 130 or higher, and superior talent or aptitude. 3 criteria. Preciosity. Number 2, marching to their own drummer. Number 3, a passion to master. Nature, nurture. Domain-specific giftedness and development, self-directed. Education of children who are gifted can be under challenge smarter than teacher, encouraged to take higher level classes. African American, Latino, and Native American children are underrepresented gifted program. Vocabulary, grammar, and metalinguistic awareness. Number 1, reading, writing, bilingualism, and second language learning. Middle and late childhood change occur in the way children's mental vocabulary is organized. Similar advance in grammar skills, metalinguistic awareness, knowledge about language. Number 1, understanding what a preposition is. Number 2, being able to discuss the sound of language. Reading, whole language approach. Whole language approach, reading instruction should parallel children natural language learning. Phonics approach. Phonic approach, reading instruction should teach basic rules for translating written symbols into sounds. Writing. Writing, parents and teachers should encourage children early writing. Do not be concerned with letter formation or spelling. Give children writing opportunities. Writing skills improve with as a language and cognitive skills improve. Writing use organization and logical reasoning. Next is being a competent writer is linked to being competent reader. Next is children learn planning. Children learn planning, drafting, revising, and editing as metacognitive awareness and writing competence improve. Second language learning and bilingual education. Second language learning, bilingualism has positive effect on children cognitive development. For example, attention control, concept formation, analytical reasoning, inhibition, and cognitive flexibility, complexity, and monitoring. Subtractive bilingualism. Bilingualism, when immigrant children speak their native language at home, become bilingual at school, then speak only English. Their bilingualism has negative effect. Bilingual education. Research support bilingual education for academic achievement. Type of cancer in children. Of the cancer that affect children, 39% are leukemia, 15% are brain, 10% are lymphoma, 7% are neuroblastoma, 6% are bone, 6% are kidney, 5% are muscle, and other cancer make up remaining 12%. Piaget Cognitive Development Theory. The graph show level 1 where there is one person who had 3 children making up level 2. Those 3 children then had 2 children each, making for 6 total at level 3. Only one of the 6 at level 3 had children, and that person has 3 children at level 4. Information processing. With random numbers, the children remember approximately 6 and the college student approximately 9 numbers when presented with location of chess piece. The children with chess experience remember approximately 8 pieces, and the college student with no chess experience remember approximately 6 pieces. Working memory. And badly working memory model. Working memory is like a mental workbench where a great deal of information processing is carried out. Working memory consists of three main components, with the phonological loop, visuospatial working memory helping the central executive do its work. Inputs from sensory memory goes to phonological loop, where information about speech is stored and rehearsal take place, and visuospatial working memory, where visual and spatial information, including imaginary, are stored. Working memory is a limited capacity system, and information is stored there for only a brief time. Working memory interact with long-term memory, using information from long-term memory in its work and transmitting information to long-term memory for longer storage. The normal curve and Stanford binet. One way to approach the graph is to read it from left to right. As the frequency builds, the normal distribution theory predicts that 0.1% of the population will have a Stanford binet IQ score of 55 or lower, and 2.3% will have Stanford binet IQ score of 70 or lower. The normal distribution theory predicts that 15.9% of the population will have Stanford binet IQ score of 85 or lower, and 50% will have a Stanford binet IQ score of 100 or lower. The normal distribution theory predicts that 84.1% of population will have Stanford binet IQ score of 115 or lower. 97.7% will have Stanford binet IQ score of 130 or lower. And finally, 99.9% will have a Stanford binet IQ score of 145 or lower. Another way of approaching the graph is to break into segments, starting with most frequent Stanford binet IQ score. 134.13% of population will have Stanford binet IQ score. Between 100 and 115, 13.59% of population will have Stanford IQ score. Between 115 and 130, 2.14% of population will have Stanford binet IQ score. Between IT and 130 and 145, and only 13% will have Stanford binet score than 145. Moving in the direction starting with most frequent Stanford binet IQ of. The end. Bye-bye.